Yeah. Okay. Okay, we're going to start, and if I can just ask your name, where you were born, and when.
I'm Trude Heller, and I was born in Vienna in 1922.
Okay. And if you could just start by telling us a little about your family life and what life was like growing up in Vienna.
I was an only child, very spoiled. My parents doted on me, and I was like an only child. And they did so much for me that sometimes I didn't think they should do all that. And it was a wonderful, wonderful childhood.
What sort of occupation was your father involved?
My father and mother both had stores for tailor's supplies. And Vienna, every suit was made to order, so the tailors had to buy 39 different things to go into a suit, and we had a couple of those stores. Mm-hmm. My mother was very active in the business, too.
Mm-hmm. And where in Vienna did you live? What do you remember?
In the second district, and there were a lot of Jews that lived in the second district, but our neighbors were not all Jewish, and my friends were not, and I was friendly with everybody.
Mm-hmm. So it was a comfortable childhood? You remember
very,
being happy?
Oh, very. Yeah. We traveled. Mm-hmm. My father loved traveling. And our passports were always ready. And for holidays, we'd go to Italy or other places. And in Europe, people do that. You know, countries are so small, it's like going from state to state here. And so we were always ready to go.
And do you remember any anti-Semitism? And how early were you aware of that?
Not very much, but some. I knew, for instance, that when I started going to dances, that it was mostly with my Jewish friends. My parents always went with me. I was chaperoned. I was chaperoned till the day I married. I was never let out of the sight of my parents. And that's how it was the day Hitler marched in. I was going to a gym class. I was 15 years old. But I wasn't allowed to go by myself, and my parents always had somebody to go with me. And I went to this gym class, and the whole city was in an uproar because they were going to vote whether to be part of Germany or not. And I did not see one swastika on the way, and I walked through the streets of Vienna. But I saw all the other signs of the 3 arrows and the hammer and sickle and all different color flags, and everybody was yelling for their party. The gym class was half an hour. When I came out, the city was a sea of swastikas.
Just within that time?
Every building had a swastika flag. Every policeman pulled out a swastika armband, and there was everything else was gone. And it was, of course, I had to change, so maybe the whole thing was 45 minutes or an hour. But that's how, this I'll never forget, because it was such a shock to go in without a swastika and come out. And I came home, and every synagogue was burning. And my parents came, and my father said, "Our passports are ready, let's go." And my mother says, "Are you crazy? What do you mean, let's go? This is where we live. This is where we make our living. This is where our money is. What do you mean, let's go? Where do we go? And what do we do? And how do we leave everything behind?"
And this was actually immediately after?
The day of the Anschluss.
Do you remember that before the Anschluss, was there much talk in the house of what might happen? Were you aware of Hitler? Was that something that
Very vaguely. I was so young, you know, and I was having a wonderful time. I was going to dances, and I was, my life had not changed at all. And at that age, I just really didn't pay that much attention to it.
And it didn't seem to be things that were discussed at school, for example?
Not at all. I was going at the time to what they call Handelsakademie. It was a private high school that leaned toward commerce, because in Vienna you had to decide at 14 what kind of college you wanted to go to. So if you went to a medical college, you went to high school that was for that, and I wanted to be in business, and I went to the commerce high school. And from that day on, I was never called on again, and then I had to quit. So at 15 and a half, my education ended.
That was it. And so you remember that your family's your parent was it your father and mother both who did they both come to the conclusion that they had to get out or
not at that moment. No, my mother said no way.
Yeah.
Are we going to leave everything behind?
Yeah.
And my father wanted to.
Your father was the one who wanted
yeah,
to.
he really did. And we had our passports and everything, and he said, let's go.
Yeah.
And my mother said, no, you can't do that. Where are we going to go?
So
and then it started. Where are we going to go?
Yeah.
You know, and things changed very quickly. But we still. I remember we had help in the house, and she had to leave. Nobody under 65 that wasn't Jewish could work for a Jewish family. And then we had stores, and all their help had to leave. And there were some friends we had, Jewish young people that were my friends who helped out in the store. They had nothing else to do. And so it was on Kristallnacht. Before that, the first week that Hitler had taken over, they came and got our car. And somebody came with a rifle butt and knocked on the door and said car keys, and that was it. And what are you going to do? You hand them over. And so went the car. And then a little while later, somebody wanted our apartment. My parents had bought it before they were married, and they put in bathrooms and made it very attractive. And within 6 hours, and they said whatever is not out in 6 hours stays, and also if you're not out, you get killed. So my mother went to look for an apartment. My father went to get boxes, and I started packing. And within 6 hours, we were out. Of course, we had to leave most everything behind. But there were several buildings that were not so nice anymore where people like us could move to. And we moved to this place that had in the courtyard, and they're mostly Jews who had been displaced from their places, living there.
Still within the second district?
Yes. Yeah. And this is where we went. And this is where we lived. And then one day, my father was still going to the store, and a friend of mine was helping in that store. And my father one day said, you know, it's getting kind of dangerous. They were robbing people. They were coming in and taking everything from Jews that they could. And we had very nice cameras and things like that. He says, I'm going to take him to the store. So he took the cameras, and he took keys, and he took all kinds of things. And he left. And when he left, I got a call from a girlfriend. And she said, don't let your father leave. And she hung up. I didn't know what was going on. Excuse me. All of a sudden, my father came back, and he says, I'm lost. This is it. They were downstairs arresting people, and I knew the guy who arrested me. And I asked him, could I turn over the keys to my family? And he said, okay, I'll wait for you. And he says, I'm lost. I'll never see you again. This is it. So my mother went next door. First, she made him put on long underwear, because it was winter in November. And she went next door, and a very elderly Jewish lady and her son, who wasn't well and was also maybe in his 50s, were living there. And she said to her, would you let my husband hide? And they said yes. So my father went in there, and they came for him. And my mother said, he left this morning. And then he went next door and asked and took the woman's son. And she didn't tell that my father was there. Then I called the store, and this friend of mine was in the store, and I said, we're coming there. And he said, why? And I said, you don't know what's going on. Well, that was Kristallnacht. That was the day the Jewish boy in Paris killed the German attaché. And the Austrians were giving a hand. What they could do with the Jews as they wished. I went down and I got a cab. And my father was hiding on the bottom of the cab, and the cab driver did not give him away. We went to the store, and it had these rolling shades, you know, the iron ones, the shutters. We went in, closed it from the inside. There was no bathroom in there. And we stayed in there for 28 hours. They came and they rapped on it, and we didn't move. And my girlfriend called us. We had a telephone, and she told us when it was over. And we came back out, and we survived that night. It was a horrendous night. And so did this young man who also lives in North Carolina now.
Really?
Yes.
What when you remember coming, when the shutter finally came up and you came out into
Well, that wasn't that easy. First of all, you know, we were in there without lights, without toilets. It wasn't that easy to come out because they had put a swastika seal on the keyhole that we could see looking out. And if you tear a swastika, it's certain death. You know, it's like defacing something. Well, it was up to me, and the keys at the time had those long fronts, you know, and it was up to me, and I did it very gently, and we went out. And we survived.
What did you hear when you were in there for over that day that you were there?
We heard a lot of shouting going on. We heard voices. We didn't know what it was, and I didn't want to call my friend too often. And after all, I didn't know what was going on there. But her father was very old, and they left him alone. But they were looking for my father, and especially for that young man who was with us, hiding out with us. And I remember we were telling ghost stories at night, you know, to make the time go by. And we slept on the tables a little bit, and had a pail. And that's how we survived that night.
What did the streets look like when you finally came out?
Not much different.
Not much different?
No.
Wasn't a great deal?
But a lot of people had disappeared that night. You know, they took away so many. And that was our really first brush was this. And they were only taking men, no women or children. They were taking men. That wasn't the first thing that happened to me. The first thing that happened to me was that they came to ask me to wash the streets with my mother. And we went to a place where they had Mongdovit's Stars of David all over, and we had to scrub them. And I knew a lot of the people. After all, I grew up in that neighborhood, and they all spoke to me, and I didn't say very much. I was afraid to say the wrong thing. And then all of a sudden, they sent away all the other people and kept me there. I was a young girl. And they started surrounding me and touching me. And 2 German officers came in, army people, not SS, army. And they saw what was going on and they broke it up. And I was very lucky. And I went home and I cried for 36 hours. I had to have shots and all that because I couldn't. You know, I was very brave while it was going on, but I was only 15 years old.
Did it seem like? I mean, of course, it's a nightmare now when you're talking about it. How did it feel at the time? Did it seem like it was unreal?
It was. You felt like this can't be happening. Why would it be happening? How can men do this to men? I mean, it was worse than animals. And it was people I knew. I couldn't figure out, and I still can't, what happens to people. And I don't know what can happen to people to bring something like that on.
Yeah. So just to get back to after Kristallnacht,
Yes.
and what happened, then did you all feel that was a turning point? Did you know that?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Then our whole focus was on getting out.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd lost everything already, so we wanted to get out, and we couldn't find any place to go. Nobody would have us. If you could get a visa in another country, if you had to go through another country, they wouldn't let you because they were afraid you'd stay there. So we had no place to go. So one day in January, my father got a letter to come to the Gestapo, and nobody ever came back from that. So the same friend was visiting, and my father said, "I'm leaving." And my mother said, "What do you mean you're leaving?" He says, "I'm going to get out. I'm not going to the Gestapo. I'll try to get to another country, and then I'll let you know how to do it." And this young man said, "Take me with you." And he said, "Okay, let's go." And they took, I still had from my dolls, the little suitcase, and they put in a shaving brush and a shirt each. And they left. And my father and I had made a language between us. And a day later, I got a call, and he was in Antwerp, Belgium. And how did you get to Antwerp? He says, "Okay, listen good." And the language we had made up between us. He went in on the train without a visa or anything, heading towards Rotterdam. And when they came near the border, my father went to the dining room, and he gave one of the waiters, he picked one of the waiters, and he gave him money and said, "Will you hide me on the border and my friend?" And he said, "Yes." They put him on the table in the dining car with the tablecloth over it. And they came to the border, and they went into the compartment where they were and found those two little suitcases. And nobody claimed them. So they started to search the train, and nobody claimed them. But all the waiters stood in front of the table, and they didn't find them. So they went on to Rotterdam. And my father said to this young man, "When we get to Rotterdam, they'll be looking for us because they found the little suitcases." He says, "Get off, stretch, light a cigarette, act like you're going to get back on, and then make for the nearest exit, and we'll find a place with a kosher sign, and they'll help us." And that's exactly what happened.
That's what happened.
They went to the place with the kosher sign. They got him false papers to Antwerp, because Antwerp gave 30-day permissions to stay. But if you were not then, if you didn't get another permission,
a sort of transit visa,
then they send you back because you couldn't work, you didn't have any money, so they send you away. So they did that. They sent one by train and one by car with false papers, and they got to Antwerp. So my father called me, and he already had an apartment. We had relatives in Poland. At the time, Poland was still all right, and they sent him money. And he took this apartment. He called me, and he said, "Okay, this is what you do. You do exactly that." He says, "I told the waiter, I told the people in the store." And my mother was one of those hysterical people that all her emotions were on her face. And I was the leader. And so we shipped 6 boxes of stuff to my father in Belgium. Then my mother and I got on that train. We had the schedule of this waiter. We were put into a compartment that happened to have other refugees in it, and nobody knew where they were going. All they knew is they were going to the border, but nobody had any other. And I couldn't tell them what we were doing because I would jeopardize that, and I felt terrible. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And we went to the dining car, and I found the waiter, and I told him I had twice the money. And they had promised my father, and he said to me, "Don't speak to me, I'm being watched." And that was the end of that. So we went back into the compartment. And at the border in Cologne, we had to get off. And here we were in Germany with the Austrian accent, which you immediately know. No ration cards, which everybody had ration cards for food. And with several people who were all in the same boat. One of them produced a telegram from a friend that there was one hotel that would put you up in the eaves. Otherwise, every hotel had a no Jews allowed sign on it. And we all went there. And there they had guides that came in the middle of the night to take you across the border, if you paid them. Well, we still had my grandfather in Vienna, and he kept sending us enough money for a couple of days each time. And so we sat. Unfortunately, I was young and had a lot of problems fending off Germans who knew our predicament and figured it was an easy mark. But my mother was like a mother hen and helped me fend them off. But that was a hard thing. I found a cheese shop with a wonderful man who sold me cheese and bread without ration cards, so we had something to eat. And then came parade of guides, and it took us 5 weeks and many tries. We were caught many times in the middle of the night in February, in ice and snow, in ditches, and it was a horrendous 5 weeks of being searched and sent back and caught, and they'd take the men away and left the women and to go back. And each time back to Cologne, and they had Mardi Gras, and it was horrendous.
And you were still living in this hotel up in the eaves of the hotel.
Right.
And
each time we came back there.
And when you tried to, how far did you get then? I mean,
we'd take a train to Aachen, which is on the border, and then the guide would take us like on railroad tracks or in the woods, and each time we were caught. I mean, I remember lying in a ditch and the car coming and the beam coming and a rifle being stuck in my shoulders, and then they'd take us back and search us. And then the guides sometimes had paid these people off to let us through. And then one day we made it into no man's land. There was a farmhouse, and a lot of German soldiers were hanging out there. And I couldn't open my mouth. And one of them said he fell in love with me, and he handed me a note and said, "I know exactly you're trying to get out," he said to me, "but here's my name and address. I'm in love with you, and you must let me know when you get there. I will follow you." And I said, "Sure." And then the border police came in, and I dropped us. I didn't want to be caught with that. And they sent us back again after we had walked all night in ice and snow. And the memory is a funny thing. I remember it vividly, yet I don't want to dwell on it. But it was a horrendous thing because, for instance, we couldn't go to the bathroom because there were just German soldiers all around it. And, the pain of that is still in my mind.
So I wonder do you know why you weren't then arrested rather than being sent back?
They didn't know what to do with women at the time. This was the beginning of 1939.
Yeah.
They did not have a place for women. They only took the men. And when we went back the 5th time, my father had heard about a guy in the Gestapo who wanted money outside, just in case. And he sent him to us from Belgium, through somebody in Belgium. And he came and got us, and he drove us, had us searched everywhere. I mean, we were searched from top to bottom. And then he took us in cars without lights into Belgium. And I was still fresh and young, and I said, "And what if he doesn't pay you?" And he says, "You go right back." And he brought us to Antwerp.
So you did, and then you were reunited with your father.
Yes.
Yeah. And where was your father living at that time?
He had an apartment in Antwerp.
Was he able to work? Was he?
Oh, no. And every 30 days we got a permit to stay for 30 days because we had money coming in from Poland.
Yeah. You mentioned the guides.
Yes.
Did you ever know who they were? Or
No, you didn't really speak, or you just followed.
Yeah.
Hoping you'd get out.
So you didn't know exactly where they came from or what they're...
One day we were under the eaves of this hotel, and I had to go out to get some. My mother had the flu besides. She had 104 temperature, and I had to go get something. So I was nimbly walking down the steps, and as I always do, I fell down the steps. And 2 German officers picked me up. And I was afraid to even say thank you because my German is so different, you know. Even
the Vienna accent,
you can even tell it in English because I have a different accent than the German.
What do you remember of Cologne at the time? I mean, what was...
As little as possible, you know. We didn't venture out. We just stayed put till another guide came along. And all I did was go for food. And it's a horrendous time of why people would do this to people.
And do you know, or did you ever find out who made the arrangements for the guides? How that came about?
This little hotel we stayed in was infamous for that, but it also was raided regularly, and men were taken away.
So it was obviously some sort of network that people must have known about.
And also the guides paid off. Don't forget, you know, so that they knew they'd get paid off. And I know one of the places we tried to get out of, a week later somebody was shot there. You know, it was at night, I mean, in the woods. I went back to Aachen not long ago. I said, I've never seen Aachen. I saw the woods, not the
city. So if I could just take you, so you and your mother were reunited with your father in Antwerp.
Yes.
And getting these, living month to month when you got the visas renewed. What happened then?
It so happened that the landlord wanted more money for the place then, and he couldn't get us out. So he went to the police and told them we were refugees and that we had no permit. And they came, and we did have a permit. And my father sort of flipped. He would have really done something to him if he had found him at that moment. But we did move out. And then our whole focus was on getting out of there. We found out that the Chilean consul was out of town, and the vice consul was selling visas to Chile. So I went in with our passports, and we bought visas to Chile. And we booked passage on a big ship to go to Chile. And I found somebody that spoke Spanish, and I started learning how to speak Spanish. And the day our luggage went aboard, we went to sleep, and in the middle of the night, we were awakened by the consul of Chile, who came back and found out and came to cancel our visas, and I still have those. And we were very distraught because now we were back to square one. But the boat sank, and 500 people drowned, and so I always felt fate.
So it was a good thing those visas were. They came in, or you certainly
there are
would have
reasons
been on
for
that
things,
boat.
I suppose.
So
we continued, and we found that we had like a third cousin 4 times removed in the United States. He was related through a relation. He was willing to send us some papers, and he did, but he had 5 unmarried daughters, no insurance, and $100 in the bank. which is not a good affidavit.
No.
Because he had to guarantee that the three of us would not be wards of the state.
Right, yeah. Where was he living?
He was living in New York.
In New York.
And so I went to the consulate, the American consulate, and the consul general was a really great man. His name had a French name by the name of Lheureux. And I said to him, and I spoke little English, and I said, believe me, we will work. We don't need help. We'll do anything. And I think maybe he believed me, and he said, okay. You and your mother will get a visa, but not your father because he's different quota. My father was born in Krakow.
Oh, so he was in the Polish
So
quota.
he was in the Polish quota. My mother and I were born in Vienna. So we said, of course, you know, whatever. And we got our visas, and a year to the day that we got to Antwerp, my mother and I had to leave and leave my father behind. And we went through the Channel, which was an interesting experience. The war had already started. It was in '39. And we got to the United States, and I started to work on papers for my father. And on May the 9th, he wired us that he had booked passage on the 11th, that his passport was at the consulate.
Would this be 40 by now?
Yeah, 40.
Yeah.
And on the 10th, Hitler marched into Belgium. And we did not hear anything for weeks and weeks. And on July 18th, my husband, Max, who we were boyfriend and girlfriend at the time, who lived in Greenville, South Carolina, and I was living in New York, surprised me and came to the door. And with him was a Western Union boy with a telegram from my father that he was alive. So he's always been my good luck person.
And you were in New York at this time.
Yes.
What do you remember? What ship did you take over?
It was a Dutch ship called the Westernland. It was a small ship. We had to dock at night because of the floating mines, and it was in February, and it was terribly windy, and the whole ship was ill. And we watched all the mines go by, and we watched all the sunken ships go by. And we made it, but they took several people off on stretchers. It was so bad, and but we made it. It was a long journey, yeah.
So you landed in New York?
Landed in New York, yes.
Do you remember what your feelings were when you...
Yes, lost. But we had my mother's brother had gotten to New York, and he took a room for us for $3 a week. And I had to stand on the bed to get dressed and undressed, but that was fine. And I went to work the same day. I got a job. I went through the paper, and I got a job putting flowers on hats and things like that. And my mother got a job, too. And we worked.
Had you learned English in the meantime? Or what was
well,
your English like?
I learned English in school, and I wasn't fluent. I could read and write better than I could speak, and the speaking came. I don't think it's much better today. Sometimes I'd like to change it, but I can't.
And so your father then, just take us back to when your father...
My father was going to leave Belgium the next day when the Germans came in. They put all the political refugees into boxcars and sealed them and shipped them for 3 days and 3 nights into the French desert, and very many died on that journey. They got out in the French desert where they had an old army camp from the civil Spanish War, and they found rusty cans and things, and my father said he was a cook, so he figured if he's in the kitchen he'd have something to eat. And that's what happened. They kept him into detainee camp in the French desert. And one day he escaped and made his way to Marseille. And that's when he wired us. And then I got busy and got a lot of people to help bring him, and he finally came, but it took a long time.
It must have been a great day when it finally happened.
You can imagine.
Yeah.
But we were so lucky. Yeah. Even my grandfather got out of Vienna, so we were very lucky. But we lost between my husband's family and ours, over 100, maybe 200 people in the family. I had those people that were in Poland, our relatives, and we told them, get out. They wouldn't listen. They had big business and homes, and said, what do you mean get out? They wouldn't listen. And then they killed most of them. I had an aunt with 3 little girls, and they took the little girls by the feet and smashed their heads against a tree in front of their mother. What makes people do that? I mean, that is something that I think scientists should study. What can happen to a person to be able to do that? Man.
So, once your family, your immediate family, was finally all together in New York, and both you and your mother were working, what happened? Where did you think you would remain in New York?
Yes.
You did? Okay.
Yes, until my husband came along and told me that I was moving to Greenville, South Carolina.
So tell us about that. How did you first meet, and how did you meet back?
Yeah, we met in a summer resort near Vienna, and we were kids, and I was never allowed alone. So in the resort, I was allowed to walk away from my parents a little bit, and we walked and talked, and we danced. We danced a lot because everybody in Vienna, and especially in the summer resort, you were dancing every night, and that's what we did. And then he wrote beautiful letters, and while I was in Belgium, he was even going to marry me by proxy to bring me to the United States.
So you were in touch all this time?
Yes, and but my parents wouldn't even allow that. And even in New York, I wasn't allowed alone.
You were a well-brought-up young lady.
Yeah, oh, very.
So he was living in Greenville at this time.
Yes.
So did he come up to New York to get you? Is that how it happened?
He came up to visit, and then he finally talked my mother and father into coming to Greenville for a visit. So my mother and I came for a visit, and I wasn't very happy because he knew everybody in Greenville, and I didn't know anybody.
What were your first impressions of South Carolina? How did it
Well,
appear
at that
to you?
moment, the first impression was that I didn't know anybody there, and I wanted to go home. But then I guess love conquers all, and we were married in Greenville.
And you remained.
Oh, yes. Love it. It's been wonderful.
And so you were there then, and the war went on. And did your parents remain did they eventually come to Greenville?
They came with me to Greenville. Oh, yes. They came with me. But after we married a while and they saw that we were doing all right, they went back to New York.
And they remained then in New York? They
remained in New York,
And you remained in Greenville?
Yes.
And as the war progressed, do you remember how you felt about being in America? I mean, were you always very conscious of the fact that you were lucky to escape?
Oh, yes. We tried, Max and I both tried always to bring people out and to talk to people about how you can save lives. It was very difficult because of the quota system. Very few people had any contact. I remember when I lived in Vienna, my name was Schöntal, which was not a very common name. I went to the library and got phone books from New York and places, and even to Australia. And I wrote every Schöntal a letter and asked him to help me. And I didn't really get any responses, no.
How long were you able to keep in touch with the Polish branch of your family? I mean, how long did that contact last, and how did you find out what happened to them then?
Um, it was horrendous because when Hitler marched into Poland, you know, we lost all contact. And they knew where we were. And then those that survived got in touch with us, and we helped bring him to the United States. My father, some of them got into Cuba, and my father went and got them even and brought them to the United States. And we begged them beforehand to leave, and they wouldn't. And as we didn't believe the Germans, because you can't believe that people can really do this to people. Who could believe that?
Yeah. As I asked Mr. Heller, I'll ask you the same question. When did you feel? Well, first let me ask you another question. Did you ever feel homesick for Vienna, for Austria at all?
Never.
Not at all.
Never.
Not at all.
And I really never wanted to go back, but we did. And it's funny you're saying that, because when we got to the airport in Vienna, the fellow looked at my passport and said, "Oh, you came home." I said, "Oh, no." I said, "I'm going home to the United States." I'll never forget that conversation.
And Mr. Heller
I'm
felt...
a tourist in Vienna.
You're now a tourist in Vienna. And he felt that he started feeling American very early after getting here. Did you have the same feeling?
Oh, yes.
You too?
Oh, definitely. I always said, I'm sorry I wasn't born here. That's because, I was very young and very happy to be here.
So the adjustment was not terribly difficult for you?
Not at all for me. It was harder on our parents because they were older. The language was harder. Everything was harder. But for us, I can't even think of not being here.
Do you remember very clearly when the war ended? How it felt and where you were?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were jubilant, the way it ended. And people don't remember so much anymore. It's been so long, and that's why it's so wonderful to have an opportunity like this for children to learn what it was like. It was hard to even tell people about it. And to tell you the truth, as our children came along, we told them very little because we wanted them to have an open mind and not hate a people, because that's no good. You can hate an individual for something, but don't hate a whole people, because every person should be be their own person. And we've always said that to our children, and that's what we're trying to do, because hate will eat you up.
After the war, then you settled in Green. You felt like you were at home. And how did you become involved with the community then? How did that all come about?
Well, we always we had 3 children quite quickly, and we decided one of us had to be home more than the other. So Max did all the activities in the community at the time, and I did the activities with the children, including schools and whatever. And then as they got older and we had more time, we both got very active in the community, and always were very interested in what was going on, and especially to help others.
And so you've remained doing that?
Oh, yeah. We still do. I would be very unhappy if I couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, or anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, I'd like to say if children see this, that they should be kind to their fellow man always, not do ugly things to them, because that's how it started. And it becomes easier and easier to do it, I think. I think people see other people doing ugly things and they'll join them in doing it. And that's how posses are made. I think that people should treat people like they would like to be treated themselves. and I've tried to do that.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Heller.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.